Feeding you too? After you just invited yourself along? You should be grateful for water. The water here is really good, because it's a fancy place. Bet it tastes amazing, huh? I sit at a fancy restaurant where I was supposedly invited, staring at the lonely glass of water placed before me. While other family members enjoy their courses, my mother-in-law makes yet another shocking comment. My name is Chloe. I started working for a major company right out of college and have been busting my tail in sales ever since. My parents always nag me about getting married whenever we meet. Finally, giving in to their tearful pleas, I reluctantly joined a matchmaking service. At 37, I met Ricky, who's 5 years younger, and we tied the knot. Just when I thought this would put my parents at ease, an unexpected trial hit us. Ricky's company went under due to an economic downturn. Thankfully, we both work and I have enough savings to get us through. I encouraged Ricky, offering him to stay home and take care of the household until he finds another job. His housework skills aren't great, but it's a relief to have someone manage the home. While supporting him, I occasionally put in overtime to revamp sales materials and make more in performance bonuses. But months go by and Ricky shows no sign of wanting to work again. I suggested, how about you start working part-time? Ricky declines, saying it's not viable for his future. He starts getting irritated whenever I inquire about his job search. He might be relaxed because he is still getting unemployment benefits, but it keeps me anxious while his endless job hunt continues. Eventually, Ricky starts saying, "Give me money." It seems he's burned through all his savings from when he was single. I don't know how much he had, but his lifestyle did seem pretty extravagant after becoming a stay-at-home husband. He'd buy indoor exercise equipment because he had time or bring home trending video games. If it's like this just from what I see, he must have been reckless with his spending. But now, with his unemployment benefits gone, I'm the one supporting us. In exchange for Ricky taking on the household chores, I've been covering most of the expenses, from rent to utilities, groceries, and daily necessities, out of my paycheck. Yet, I can't afford to give more. I don't get any allowance or compensation for housework, Ricky argues. I don't have a single dollar for myself. Can't you give me a bonus once in a while? Fed up, I snap back at him. I don't have an allowance either, and I really can't give more. I get why you want a full-time job, but just get any job for now, even part-time. We can't keep going like this. Our arguments over money have become frequent, but they always end in a stalemate. Eventually, Ricky started receiving financial help from his parents, which strained my relationship with them. Visiting his parents, my mother-in-law preaches, "A woman should silently support her husband, make more money and let my son be free." This has only driven a wedge further between me and his parents. One evening, Ricky surprises me by suggesting that we go out to eat. Apparently, he's secured reservations at a high-end local restaurant rumored to be a hidden gem. He happily tells me he's made reservations for 4, including his parents. I cautiously ask if he can afford such a fancy place. Then, Ricky looked away for a moment and began to speak. Actually, turns out he'd secretly taken a part-time job. He explained that it was a short daytime shift, and given our past arguments about him working full-time, he didn't know how to tell me. So, in part to apologize for all that's happened, I reserved us a nice restaurant. I was touched. If that's the case, "I'll happily accept the invitation," I responded. There were many questions I had about his workplace and job, but Ricky said, "We'll talk about it at dinner," keeping the details vague. Nonetheless, for the first time in a while, a cheerful subject had lightened the mood between us. But days later, in a quaint private room at a restaurant, I would find out the real reason for the dinner and shake with anger. From the moment we arrived, something seemed off about the restaurant staff. They looked slightly surprised to see us, whispered something to mother-in-law, who led the way. So simply smiled and said, "It's fine," urging them to show us to our room. Once inside, she designed seats for everyone. My seat was, as always, closest to the entrance. It seemed to be a family rule, regardless of whether the meal was Ricky's way of apologizing to me or not. I obediently took my seat. Then the first dish arrived, and that's when things got strange. The waiter halted, looking troubled as he entered the room. My mother-in-law gestured toward my father-in-law with a rarely seen elegance, saying, "He is first, then me, followed by our son. I can't wait to see what courses we'll get." Relieved, the waiter then served the dishes in that order: father-in-law, mother-in-law, Ricky. And that's when they started explaining the dishes one by one. Finally, it dawned on me that my meal hadn't come yet. I decided to speak up after the waiter finished explaining. "Excuse me, I haven't received my food yet." In front of me, all I had was water, courtesy of my mother-in-law, who'd said, "Water will be just fine for her." The waiter's eyes widened as he began to say something, but my mother-in-law cut him off, laughing. "Oh, Chloe, you're so audacious." A daughter-in-law is a stranger in the family. You think it's okay to come uninvited to our family dinner and then demand a meal? Water is more than sufficient for a woman as rude and clueless as you. And hey, this is fancy water from a fancy restaurant. You should appreciate it. I didn't have a problem with only having water since I wanted to enjoy the food's flavor anyway, but this was simply outrageous. My mother-in-law then hustled the flustered waiter near the entrance, telling him to leave the room and adding insult to injury. "Pay $1,000 for that water. You don't get the chance to drink water at such a nice place often, so consider it a bargain for the time you've spending in this lovely room. Feel free to take your time until we're done eating." I felt a surge of anger boiling up from the pit of my stomach. I glanced at Ricky, hoping he'd say something, but he just continued eating, unfazed. My father-in-law was no better, sipping his drink as if he hadn't heard a thing. It dawned on me that they'd planned to stick me with the bill from the beginning. I felt utterly defeated. I had been genuinely happy when Ricky got a part-time job and said he'd treat me with his salary. But that was all a lie to lure me into this harassment. I was so fed up that I even found it foolish to get angry. "Fine," I agreed. "I'll pay for the water and leave first. Please enjoy your time as a family." As I left the room to settle the bill, I could hear their crass laughter echoing into the hallway. The observant waiter noticed my exit and mentioned that although he couldn't serve the pre-ordered course meal, he could prepare other dishes. I thanked him for his kindness but said I'd only pay for the water and leave. Then the waiter told me the water was free, so I promptly left the restaurant. Seeing Ricky's behavior today solidified my decision to divorce him. For a long time, Ricky was jobless and hardly attended any interviews. Once he found out there'd be no money, he conspired with his parents to blame me. Today's series of harassment was the last straw. I no longer felt any shred of love and knew I couldn't continue being married to him. As soon as I got home, I started packing, intending to leave everything else behind. My new life would have no trace of Ricky. Reflecting on it, our home was filled with Ricky's hobbies, and I didn't have much stuff anyway. I'd been saving money ever since Ricky's business went under, not knowing how long we'd be financially strained. I dragged the large suitcase I'd used during my college travels and headed to the hotel where I would stay for the night. The next morning, I felt incredibly refreshed as I ate the hotel breakfast before heading to work. It had been ages since I'd enjoyed a breakfast like this. Usually, it's just a slice of toast with no jam or butter due to my tight budget. I was impressed at how hotel services have improved recently. On my way to work, I stopped by the city office to pick up divorce papers from the after-hours window. Although only my part had been filled out, my spirits lifted surprisingly high now that I'd decided to divorce. It seemed I had been much more miserable in this marriage than I'd initially thought. Shortly after arriving at the office and starting work, I noticed a commotion in the neighboring department. As I continued to work, chatting with a colleague sitting next to me, wondering what's going on, the noise slowly but surely moved closer until it reached our department. "Hey, Chloe, get out here! You think you can run away just because you didn't come home? Mom and Dad say they'll forgive you if you come out now and apologize." I stood up, shocked. I couldn't believe Ricky and my in-laws were actually standing at the entrance of my office. As soon as they saw me, their faces turned even more hostile and they approached me directly. My mother-in-law thrust a receipt from last night's dinner at me. "I told you to pay $1,000 for the water, didn't I? You, the wife of my son, have set a trap for us. What a disgrace!" Ignoring the attention from around, Ricky and mother-in-law yelled at me. While they were doing this, my father-in-law looked around the room with an "I'm not involved" expression, just as he had the day before. I was astounded that they would go to such lengths, even taking time off to harass me like this. But no matter how aggressively they push, I had no intention of giving in. If I'm a stranger to your family, why should I pay for the meal? I don't appreciate being harassed at my workplace. If you keep disrupting, I'll call the police. Upon realizing that I wasn't going to pay, Ricky suddenly lifted a computer monitor from a nearby desk. Mother-in-law, seeing this, picked up a phone and said, "We'll show you what happens when you defy us," and slammed it on the floor. Screams and commotion spread among the female staff, throwing the room into chaos. As a worked-up mother-in-law and Ricky began hurling things with their flushed faces, father-in-law finally spoke. "If Chloe had just paid up, none of this would have happened. Sorry for causing you all trouble. She can clean all this up." He chuckled and apologized to the room. But the strangeness of his demeanor, acting as if nothing was wrong even when his family was breaking the office equipment, became even more evident. People started to move away from him, avoiding any contact. I thought I had to do something. I yelled at Ricky and his gang to stop this chaos. Trying to have a conversation with people so enraged was like talking to a wall. Just as I desperately grabbed Ricky's arm to get him to listen, police officers burst into the room. Apparently, someone from the next department over had called the cops when they started throwing office supplies around. Ricky glared at me. "You called the cops?" he yelled, and punched me in the face. Immediately, 3 officers surrounded him, tackling him to the ground. It was like a scene out of a TV drama. They arrested him on the spot for assault. Later that day, the company's CEO, myself and Ricky's parents all ended up at the police station. The company filed a report for the damaged property. I consulted a lawyer about the harassment I'd been facing, but proving some aspects, like what happened at the restaurant and Ricky's refusal to contribute financially, was tough. My lawyer suggested settling. Negotiations got complicated when Ricky lawyered up, but eventually we agreed to a divorce with no division of assets and a payment for emotional distress due to Ricky's workplace violence. Meanwhile, the assault case wrapped up in 2 quick months, and I received compensation for my injuries. As for the damages to the company, taking legal action wouldn't yield much money and would be time-consuming. More importantly, the company wanted to avoid negative attention, so they opted to settle out of court rather than file a lawsuit, it seems. In the end, they promised to pay a large settlement instead. In the end, Ricky was the only one with a criminal record, but he and his parents owed a large sum of money to me and the company. They somehow covered it with their retirement funds, leaving them practically broke. In a desperate move, his parents called Ricky back home and, through family connections, got him a job at another company. But that didn't last long either. His new employer, unbeknownst to them, had business with my company. By the time their CEO heard the full story, rumors about Ricky's volatile and dangerous behavior had already spread. Encouraged by the boss who values the company's image, Ricky decided to quit his job. Maybe he was already uncomfortable. Suddenly, Ricky moved back home and quit his new job. Rumors started in the neighborhood and eventually reached my in-laws' workplace, revealing Ricky's criminal past. Not only were they subject to criticism just for harassment, but they were now known as dangerous people who broke into their daughter-in-law's workplace and destroyed property. When this story spread from colleagues to bosses, both of my in-laws were fired, despite being close to retirement. They started to reach out for help through a lawyer. I told the lawyer I didn't need any more reports and realized there is no need to rush into marriage. Fortunately, my parents have stopped pushing me to get married. Maybe they feel guilty about something because of this incident, but they've stopped even mentioning the M word. I feel bad for my parents, but it's better this way. Now, I'm focusing on contributing to company that I've troubled. I've been assigned new projects and am enjoying the most fulfilling days of my life.